It's been a while since I have posted a video on YouTube. This is due to the fact that I was preparing for a tournament which was currently held or recently held on the 21st of February 2026. That was yesterday, and it's a 2-day event including today. Unfortunately, I was not able to join today because of the transport problem in a big city like here where I live. There's always roadworks, railworks, and that sort of thing. And I'm not going to elaborate further on that issue. Instead, I will be showing you two in that tournament which I participated and played. Now, in this game, the first game, my opponent played white or is playing the white pieces, and he is a 1687 rated player, FIDE. And 1687 rated FIDE player is a very serious player, and it's a very good one. And when I checked his profile on the Federation website, it says there that his rating is way more than the FIDE rating. That simply means that he is a very serious and strong player. So it only proves one thing. And 1687, if you think about it, it's just 1687. This is a player that plays tournament over the board. This is not a player, the kind of player that you can find online and just playing casually. This is a very serious one. And try to imagine that new kids or new players with 1400, 1500 rating, they are very serious and so difficult to beat. Just try to imagine that in a 1687 like this. It's a very serious one. Therefore, if you think that you are better than anybody, or if you think that you're good enough in playing chess, then why don't you play the tournament and find it out yourself if you're really that good? Anyway, um, the funny thing about this tournament is because I arrived late, and when I arrived, I went straight to the arbiter and apologized. And I said, "Look, I'm sorry I was late." And he said to me that it's okay. You still have 30 minutes to play your first move, and if you cannot do that, then I will declare you forfeit if you cannot play your first move in the next 30 minutes of your clock. And since I'm already late, my clock was already running, and my opponent played his first move, which is d4. And I asked him, "Oh, so which board will I be playing?" And he said to me, "You're playing in 19, so I mean on 19 or in 19, whatever you say." And I was looking for the board 19, and he said to me, come here on the 20, board 20." So he made a mistake as well. So instead of 20, he said 19. And yes, I went to the board and board 20, and I shake the hands of my opponent and took off my jacket. I was still sweating, and when I look at the time, I have already consumed almost 9 minutes of the time. Since he has to start it, he was playing the white pieces, played his first move, and start the clock. So I'm losing already almost 9 minutes of the time since I was late. So I played my first move, which is um, knight f6. So after playing this move, I left. I left the board. I went to the toilet, and I went down to the restaurant to buy something to eat and to drink to calm my nerves down. And when I got back, I looked at the clock, and I almost consumed 20 minutes of the time. Almost, probably 19 something of my time. And my opponent's clock was still 1 hour something, plus seconds. And I saw that he played his second move, which is c4. And so I sat down and played my second move as well, which is g6. I was thinking of a Grunfeld defense in case if my opponent played knight c3, but did not. Instead, played the aggressive move h4. Now, h4 is with one clear indication that my opponent doesn't want to be friendly, that my opponent means business, then my opponent is not going to play casually. H4 is a serious um, aggressiveness, and it shows hostility already, because he doesn't want you to be relaxed. He wants you to be sweating, and I was already sweating because I was running from the station to the venue, and my opponent doesn't want me to relax and attacks me on the third move, which is h4. And I calmly, since we are a principled player, that's what we are taught when we start learning chess, to become a principled player. And instead of that, playing the engine recommendation, which is c3, I played d4, attacks the center and challenges the flank c4 pawn. And my opponent played the top engine move, which is pawn takes pawn, and I took it back with my queen, which is, according to Stockfish, an inaccuracy, because my queen can be driven out by playing knight c3, which my opponent just capitalized on it, or played it and attacks my queen. And instead of going back to its original square, I played queen a5. My opponent also played the top engine move, and instead of retreating, I played c5, challenging again, since we are a principled player. And my opponent played the top engine move again, which is d5, and instead of doing what the engine recommends, which is bishop f or bishop g7, I played the most serious mistake, bishop f5. I did not realize that when this pawn pushes here, then I cannot capture it, because I will lose my knight or my bishop, due to the fact that this knight can capture it back and create a threat on my queen, which is a discovered attack. My opponent played e4, and I played bishop g4 with one objective, to make my opponent play f3, which is also one of the engine moves. And that's exactly what happened in the game, and I retreated my bishop, since the light squared bishop has done its part, creating, or help my opponent create a serious weakness on the dark squares on his king side of the board. So g3 was played. I don't really understand the move, because it further weakens his king side of the board, and I played e6 as a principled player, like they used to say, challenge the center, break the pawn chain, and that sort of thing. And so b5 was played, attack my queen with a discovered attack, and I move my queen to b6, which is, as far as I'm concerned, it's a safe square for my queen. And my opponent played a4. I did not fully understand a4. I thought it was just a waiting move or an attack on the flank, like many aggressive players do. So I proceeded with my own objective to ease the pressure on the central squares of the board, and took the pawn, and my opponent attacks my queen, and I retreated the queen back to its original square. Now, there are so many variations in this position. I can play like, what you call this? Queen c6, which is the top engine move. But I did not play that, because I didn't quite understand, and did not favor, because I thought that queen c6 is not that safe after all. Anyway, the game continued with e5, attacking my knight, and this has already been anticipated, so I moved the knight to h5. So now you can see, and I mean, it's self-explanatory why I moved the knight there, because the knight can attack this in case if this pawn moves forward, then I can hop the knight there, attacking um, with a double attack on the rook and the bishop, and if one or either one moves, then I can capture the other piece. So it's self-explanatory. That is why I evaluated this position already beforehand, but the only move that I did not anticipate was this a5 push. Anyway, the game continued with king f2. Now king f2, according to Stockfish 18, I'm using Stockfish 18 on Lichess or in Lichess, or I'm using Lichess Stockfish 18 if my English is not that good. Anyway, yes, king f2 according to Stockfish 18 is an inaccuracy on my opponent's part. So I played a6, thinking that I can drive the knight away from its outpost, but it turns out to be a serious strategical blunder on my part because of the move, or the nifty move, bishop g5 attacking my queen. And I have seen this already, and I thought of blocking it with a pawn, and if the pawn takes and something like that, then I will walk into a serious positional disadvantage, because my king is now exposed than his. So therefore, being a what's principled player, I prefer king safety. And if the bishop goes here, blocking the attack, then the knight can just check me out, and then I will lose the right to castle because I just have to move the king. I cannot capture the knight because my queen will hang. So anyway, it's all self-explanatory. There's no, or it's not difficult to analyze the game, because the game is quite simple really. So when the bishop moves there, I moved my queen to c8. I have seen this already because the continuation is what my evaluation, or I have seen this in my evaluation or initial evaluation already. So I took the knight, and he captured back my bishop with his pawn, and instead of castling, which is what the engine recommends, I defended the pawn because the pawn was under attack by the queen. So bishop h3, which is a serious blunder for my opponent. So I castled because we are a principled player and king safety is our top priority. Therefore, if we look at it, you see, if I did not castle, let's say for example, let's go back a bit. If I did not castle, and since this bishop is challenging mine, and if I captured the bishop, let's say for example, if I captured the bishop, and look at the evaluation bar, just look at the evaluation bar, and if I captured the bishop, look, I give my opponent the positional advantage, which is a plus 2.4. So it's really a blunder capturing that bishop. Therefore, castling short is the way to go as far as I'm concerned. So the game continued with g4 attacking my knight, and my knight just hopped back to g7. Now, if you look at the position, I have evaluated this already. And if you look at the position, my king is way safer than his. His king is, I mean, a bit exposed. I'm not saying it's too exposed, but it is exposed. The game continued with bishop f6 attacking my knight, and in this position I have evaluated the move queen c1 and queen d2 already. I have seen it because if the queen reaches to this square h6, then it will become serious because it has a mating threat of queen takes knight on g7 with a checkmate. Therefore, I move my knight. Since we are a principled player, I develop my knight to c6. So instead of playing the top engine move, which is queen d7, I played or I develop the knight. And queen c1. And like I said, yeah, that's the move there. Now, in this position, I should have played c4. C4 is really too strong. It was not recommended by the engine, but C4 according to my evaluation. But I messed up the wrong, the move order. But based on my evaluation or initial evaluation of the position, I should have played this first instead of playing the other moves. But like I said, I messed up the move order and played the knight to e8 and become defensive because I was protecting this square, you see. And the bishop moves to trap my rook, and in this position I would prefer to exchange my rook with the bishop because the most active piece in my opponent's arsenal is this dark squared bishop. And so I proceeded with my plan to push the pawn to c5. Now c5 is really a strong move, but I should have played that before playing knight e8. Anyway, game continued. You will see it later on. So the game continued with h5. Now h5 is a serious strategical blunder on my opponent's part. So since or in this position onward, I don't think that my opponent has recovered, because if you look at the evaluation bar, I am now minus 2.1 advantage. That simply means that my position is way better than my opponent. I have the winning chances, and yes, positional wise and strategic wise and material wise. So in this position, I captured the bishop, and my opponent captured it back, thinking probably that the rook is not going anywhere, without even realizing that I have a check, and he covers and I took the pawn. So pawn takes pawn, and I captured it back with the f pawn, with a simple plan is to put pressure on the f file, since it is a semi-open file now, where the king is located on f2. So my opponent played rook e1, attacking or mounting an attack on the bishop, pinning it to the queen. And I have seen this in my initial evaluation already, so I played knight c7 instead of knight g7. So knight g7 is probably an inaccuracy, and it's a bad move because it cannot move to any of these squares, right, except to defend the bishop, because it has no forward mobility. These two squares had been guarded by this pawn, so it would be an active square for the knight on c7 rather than on g7. Now, when I said that I have seen this in my initial evaluation, it doesn't mean that I'm an expert. I'm not referring to myself as an expert. So I have been misconstrued so many times that when I said that, some people will come up to the or with an assumption that, oh, I am saying that I'm an expert. No, I am not. I'm saying that based on my ability to evaluate the position, this is what I see. So yes, so according to my initial evaluation, this is a very playable position on my side of the board, and it's difficult for my opponent, meaning it shows on the evaluation bar as well, according to Stockfish 18. Now Stockfish 18 is the latest and greatest. I am using Lichess analysis board, and they're using the most advanced Stockfish out there. So my opponent played g5, adding another attacker to the pin bishop, and I calmly move my rook a to e8, and my opponent played and attacked the pawn on b7 and maintaining pressure on the bishop. And instead of playing the top engine move, which is queen d7, I move my rook instead to f7. So the my opponent captured the pawn on b7. I played queen c5 with a check, and in this position I have only one objective, is to exchange if not all my pieces, then some of my pieces, so that I will play the end game, which is, I believe that I will have the advantage. So I took the bishop with a check, knight takes bishop, rook takes rook, and he captured it back. I took the pawn attacking the rook, and he moves the rook to d1. Now I move back my queen to c5, and my opponent gave me a check, and instead of moving up, I pull the rook down to f8, blocking the attack, and my opponent retreats the queen. In this position, if you look at the your screen, Stockfish 18 recommends that I should play queen e3. I did not play that because, like I said, based on my evaluation of the position, I should block any possible entry or exit from my opponent's pieces in order to avoid any intrusion on my side of the board. Therefore, I played rook f5. Now, just to emphasize that this is the side, or this is part of the, or my side of the board. Therefore, like I said, I'm trying to prevent any possible intrusion or any possible infiltration from my opponent's pieces on my side of the board, thus blocking the queen from its vision on the c8 square and d7 square. Now my opponent moves the knight. I don't really understand the move because the knight doesn't have any forward mobility, because these squares were guarded by my pawns. Therefore, I played knight e6, attack and put pressure on the g5 pawn. And if that happens, then my opponent will lose its queen. So knight h3, because my opponent is no slouch. It's a 168700 player and defended its pawn, and what I did was to add another attacker, advance my pawn at the same time for its final glory, and I believe in it that it's the best move in this position, in spite of the fact that it is not. But in my thought process, I would add another attacker, which is a good plan. Maybe for some, maybe they will disagree with it and go for the engine recommendation. And in this position, the queen moves to e4, attacks my knight, and if that will happen, it will give my opponent a check. So Stockfish recommends to take the pawn, but I did not. I defended my knight with my queen, and the queen can give me a check, or the white queen can give me a check, but that did not happen. He defended his g pawn, and I took the f pawn with my knight. He captured back. I captured the knight back with my rook, attacking the queen. And in this position, my opponent can give me a check on e8 and a8, so these two squares. But instead of that, since my opponent is having time pressured, or with having the difficulty with its time management, and captured the pawn on d4 instead. So probably my opponent was thinking that if I captured the queen with my rook, and he can capture it back, I mean captured as well my queen, but that didn't happen. I captured his rook instead, defending my rook, and at the same time my rook can defend the queen. And in this position, my opponent only has below 30 seconds of his time. That is probably why he's panicking. He moved too fast because his position is already losing anyway. And yeah, in this position, he resigned. And I will show you the next one. The second game is quite different from the first one, since in this game my opponent is a much higher rated player. He's playing the black pieces and is rated FIDE rating of 1761. And throughout this game, I dominated the game, I dominated the position, and there are sometimes the position will become equal, but most of it um, I dominated the game. And it doesn't mean that my opponent is weak, or if my opponent did not play the best moves. Actually, as a matter of fact, my opponent played the top engine moves in the position. In the position, I'm not talking about he played like an engine, but I'm playing, or I'm saying that his uh, moves are top engine moves based on the actual position of the game. Now, without further ado, let's watch it if you're still here. And thank you. And this can be a very long video. Well, not that long, but longer than usual. Anyway, I opened up with 1c4, and my opponent responds c6, with the intention of pushing the pawn to d5 with a Slav defense formation. And I continue with the knight c3, and my opponent played d5, and I also played d4 with the intention of converting my position into a queen's gambit declined type of thing. But this is the Slav defense now of the queen's gambit variation. Anyway, so knight f6, knight f3, e6. Now we are arriving in the semi-Slav defense of the queen's gambit. And bishop g5, the usual way of developing the bishop in the queen's gambit decline. h6 attacks the bishop, bishop h4 retreats, d takes c4. Now in this position, I was quite happy because our opponent surrenders or relinquish the control of the central squares, which is the most important squares in this if you are playing chess actually. So you need to control. If you are a very what you call this principled player, then you should control the center. And in this position, our opponent, who is a very experienced player, tournament player, relinquish the control of the central squares, which I was happy about, and I took the initiative to control it myself. And my opponent attacks the bishop on h4 and continued its very aggressive style of play, and I moved the bishop to g3, and my opponent continued to advance its forces on the queen side by defending the pawn on c4. And I sent a message to my opponent that you're not the only one who knows how to play aggressive chess. Therefore, I will not allow you to just attack me. And this is one of the difference between the first game and this one, because the first one was like I allowed my opponent and just develop all my pieces calmly as a principled player. But in this game, I made sure that I will send a message to my opponent that you're not the only one who can play aggressive chess. I too knows how to play the game. Therefore, my opponent pushes the pawn and continues its a very hostile style of play, and I hop the knight to e5, and then my opponent just pushes and attack me left and right, hoping that I will give up my position sooner or later, but I didn't budge. I continued to hop my knight to a4. My Lancelot is ready on the a4 squares and participate in the attack. So h5 was played to protect the pawn, and I develop again as a principled player, capture the pawn, and at the same time develop my last squared bishop. So knight takes e4. Now in this position, if you will evaluate, or if you are the one evaluating the position, there is no reason why I don't dominate the game. If you look at it, my opponent only have one piece developed, which is the knight, which is the most active piece in my opponent's arsenal. It's just the knight, while the rest of its pieces are still stuck in its original position. Even the queen itself, it's still in the original position, or it's in their original squares. Therefore, there's really no reason why I don't dominate the game. So I castled, activating another piece, and my opponent activated its second piece, and I attacked the knight. The knight took the bishop, and I happily captured back the knight with my pawn. My opponent castled, activating the other piece, and I hopped the knight to c5. Now, the chess world call this as octopus knights. Why octopus knights? Because this knight controls this square, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. This knight alone controls all these squares, 8 squares, and the knight was posted, or have an outpost in the middle of the board. So the first time the octopus knight was popularized was during, I think, if I'm not mistaken, during the Kasparov era. It was a championship or world championship match. I'm not quite sure if it was against Karpov or someone else, but it's definitely the one of the world's championship match where Kasparov had one octopus knight, and the chess world has gone mad. And do the math in this position that I have two. I have two octopus knight, which controls not 8 but 16 squares all over the board. So again, no reason why I don't dominate the game. Yes, but then again, like I said, it doesn't mean that my opponent is playing bad moves or inaccuracies or blunders. Actually, my opponent just made one blunder and it cost him the game, and it's almost in the last few moves that cost him the game. One blunder, because my opponent played most of the top engine moves in the position. So yes, I keep on saying that because my opponent is really a good player. It just happened that my position is quite um, more, should I say, more active. My pieces are more active, and well, it was put on the proper squares where it can access all the attacking possibilities. And the game continued with queen d6, queen d2, with a simple threat, of course, and my opponent's knight challenges my octopus knights. I attack the queen retreats, I took the knight, and in this position, the queen took back the knight, which is the top engine move. And rook a d1, queen e7, and knight g5, queen d8 attacks the pawn, and queen d3 with a simple threat of queen h7 check. So in this position, my opponent played again the top engine move, which is rook takes d4, allowing the check on h7, which I happily did. And the king moves, I captured the rook, and my opponent captured back the rook with a check. I hide my king, and the bishop retreats and attacks the knight. I give my opponent a check, and the king moves to e8. I hop the knight to h7, attacking the bishop, and the bishop munches the pawn on b2. So queen takes h5, king d8, running away, and again queen takes g4, restoring material disadvantage, and king c7, and the king, or the black king, continues its spiritual journey. So I move the knight back to g5 so that the knight will become active and not staying on the outskirt of the board. King b6. I move my queen to f3 with a simple threat of queen f2 with a check, and winning the bishop in the process. But since my opponent is also a very strong player, so he played queen c5, knowing exactly what I was planning to do. So bishop b3, retreating my bishop because it was under attack, and bishop c3, rook e4 with only one intention: to infiltrate on the other side of the board. f5 attacks my rook goes to c4, attacking the queen retreats, and I gave the black king a check, which he happily blocks with the pawn, and I hop the knight, attacking the queen goes to c7, and I relocated the knight again. And the bishop attacks my queen d2, he knows the threat, a5, protecting the pawn, and exchange my rook with the bishop, losing in the process actually points, not with materials, because the materials is equal: one queen, one bishop, and one rook, and I have one bishop, one queen, and one knight. And this restores pawn advantage, or pawn equality, or equal with the pawn numbers. Queen c5 blocking the check. I give him a check on d8. Queen moves down to c7. Queen d4 with the check again. Queen c5 blocks the check. And I relocated my queen with a different plan of infiltrating on the black king. So queen d6 prevents that from happening. So I attack the queen, and the queen moves back to c5. And I relocated the knight with only one intention: knight e5. So if you look at the position, what is the threat? So the threat is the d7 square. So this is how I play chess. I don't look at the pieces, I look at the squares. And if there are pieces that's guarding that, then that's the time that I'm looking at them. But actually, I played with one intention in mind: the squares. Attack the squares, and yeah, you will see it. So in this occasion, my opponent attacks my bishop with by pushing the pawn to a4, and I capture the pawn. And I don't know why my opponent captured back the bishop, probably thinking that he is winning because of these two pawns that is already, or that are already close to the promotion squares with if you look at it, it only have 3 squares left for promotion, but blundered in the process. This is what I was talking about, that only one blunder in the game, and I mean, my opponent committed only one blunder and it cost him the game. And I check him with knight d7 check, and in this position my opponent resigned because he's going to lose the queen either way. And rook against the queen, I don't think it's a match, therefore the game is a win. So he resigned, and that was the end of my tournament game yesterday. And to those who are still watching until the end, thank you once again. And to those chess enthusiasts all over the world, wherever you are, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And that is all for now. I'll see you again some other time. Bye for now.